This is one more step along a trail that has been, taking things away from Americans, whether it is education, whether it is healthcare. All of this stuff is going to, line the pockets of a few. And what's interesting about the time that we are in, both leading up to this election and I think leading up to these midterms, is there's still a lot of space to tell this story. And it's not a good one for Republicans. It's not one that actually builds on the promises that they made, arguably outside of, I guess, like excessive funding for ICE. And I think that there are lots of stories, especially community-based stories, that are going to be told, that are going to illustrate the damaging and long-term effects of this budget bill. And there's no one better to represent that and tell that story in a compelling and sort of sticky way than state legislators and state candidates. This is what our folks do best, taking these big gnarly concepts and making them community-based. And we're going to continue to see that, whether it is the long-term care facility that is closing in someone's district and they're no longer have an option for the care that a grandparent or a parent may need. It is about accessibility to healthcare in rural communities, and whether or not your grandparents or your spouse can have a baby close by. There's all kinds of really damaging effects of this bill, and our folks are going to tell those stories and make sure that Republicans are held accountable.
I can add what I've been seeing on the ground here, in Virginia. I think voters are keenly aware of what has been happening and what's been proposed in the budget bill. We've seen in the lead up to the passage of the bill strenuous efforts to hold our Republican congressional elected officials responsible, and yet they've refused to hold town halls. Our Virginia congressmen have refused to step up and respond to constituents. And as a result, we've seen massive rallies all throughout Virginia demanding accountability, demanding that we have protections in place for our veteran communities, and that we have a meaningful response to the federal job cuts that we are seeing. And so voters are quite aware. They are responding, and they're ready to take action. And the first step in action that we're going to see in Virginia is the November elections.
And I would just piggyback off of what the senator said, is just to make sure that folks are finding out where those town halls are happening in their community. We done already had some in the 84th district. We're going to continue to have one, but making sure that, that local folks are also having these conversations. When I had my town hall, we had folks from social services there. We had local officials there. We had community leaders there to find out, really how this was going to affect people when it comes to, the services that they already, that folks are already depending on, but also, relying on the news as well to make sure that we're getting these stories and folks can find out what's going on. Because sometimes when you have working class people, they don't always have time to go to those town halls. But they do have time to turn on their TV and watch the news to find out what's happening.
And I'll just say that through my conversations with voters while I'm out in the community and knocking on doors, there's been a lot of fear, as Delegate Clark mentioned. I recently just spoke to a voter who had to move into her daughter's house. Her daughter has 2 young children, had the space for her mother, but she could not afford to continue paying her own mortgage on her meager Social Security benefits. And so had to move in, lose her independence, and feel like she's a burden on her family, as opposed to being able to, remain in her own home. And so I think that, when you couple that with healthcare accessibility and affordability, which is also an issue that we're seeing across my district, across the Commonwealth, doctors, nurses are overworked. Rural hospitals will close thanks to this bill, and it is going to impact our most vulnerable folks in the community. And it's unfortunate that we have to have a Republican majority kind of bring down all of these very negative impacts to families that are already struggling, already not able to meet the demands of their family's bills, and it's just going to continue to get worse. And so I think that, you know, while we're out talking with communities, that there is going to be a very stark difference in how Democrats govern versus Republicans govern, and that Republicans at the state level are complicit in what is happening at the federal level. And silence is a choice. And if you are not hearing a current Republican representative speaking out against this, then you need to be asking them really hard questions about how they plan on managing the state budget when all of these, you know, kind of trickle down negative impacts are going to come to the state level. And you know, make sure your ears are wide open because again, silence is a choice.